Good evening, everyone. My name is John, and I'm the event coordinator here at Valley Robinson Booksellers. Welcome to our final event of 2025, and this is a fantastic way to go out. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are here in Treaty 1 territory, and the land on which we gather is, of course, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Nunavak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, the Valley Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. We're delighted to have all of you out on this beautiful balmy night. We are here, of course, to celebrate the launch of Portage and Main, how an iconic intersection shaped Winnipeg's history, politics, and urban life by Sabrina Janke and Alex Judge. This event is, of course, hosted by the inimitable Jen Zoratti, who will be taking over in just a moment. Before she does, you have to suffer through a few introductory words, but rest assured I'll be talking about these fabulous people, so you won't have to put up with all that much. To give you an idea of how the evening will go, there will be a conversation and presentation that will take place to my left. And after that, there'll be an opportunity for you in attendance to ask questions. So at that point, please just raise your hand. I'll approach you with a microphone in a non-threatening manner, just to make sure that you're audible. And then at the end of the event, I'll be back with some exciting notes about signing procedure. We wanted to express our sincere thanks to Great Plains, who are a publisher here in Winnipeg, just incredibly dedicated to documenting and investigating the urban landscape around us. And this is yet another incredible book from that publisher that does exactly that, which just causes us to see the world around us, and particularly the city, in new and different ways. Now, to introduce our panel for this evening, to my left is Jen Zoratti, a columnist and feature writer of the Winnipeg Free Press, where she works on the Arts and Labor Desk, the National Newspaper Award finalist for arts and entertainment writing. Jen is also the author of the popular weekly culture newsletter, Next. Sabrina Janke is a historian who lives in Winnipeg, whose work has appeared on the CBC, in the Winnipeg Free Press, and Prairie History magazine. She is a recipient of the Lieutenant Governor's Award for Heritage Conservation and Promotion. Sabrina spends her free time exploring Winnipeg and crafting, and has become a reluctant bird. Alex Judge is a Winnipegger born and bred, except for a brief stint living in Montreal and a year in the Cabbagetown district of Toronto. Alex was presented with a Winnipeg 150 medal in 2024 for her work on the podcast. The podcast is, of course, One Great History, out of which this book took shape. When not in the archives, Alex enjoys crafting, mystery novels, and a newfound interest in woodworking. And now that all have been introduced, we're legally obliged to raucously welcome absolutely everybody all at once.
All right, Jen, take this away. All right, well, before we begin, I have a little thing for you, which is a message from the mayor. Oh! So I'm going to read Mayor Scott Cunningham's thoughts here. He says, I'm sorry I can't be there tonight, but I wanted to send my congratulations on the launch of Portage and Main, how an iconic intersection shaped Winnipeg's history, politics, and urban life. Sabrina and Alex, thank you for the work you put into this book. Earlier this year, I had a great conversation with Alex about Portage and Main, and it reminded me how much that corner means to Winnipeggers. The memories, the myths, the politics, and the strong opinions. Reopening the intersection to pedestrians this summer ended 46 years of debate, and it was a powerful reminder that people belong at the center of our city. Our downtown is at its best when it's open, welcoming, and full of life. As Winnipeg continues to grow and reimagine its downtown, stories like this matter. They help us understand where we've been, spark ideas about what's next. Thanks to everyone celebrating the book tonight, and Sabrina and Alex, congratulations, and looking forward to reading it. Sincerely, Scott Cunningham, Mayor of Winnipeg. All right, let's talk about this book. So maybe just to start, obviously you are Winnipeg historians. You have a podcast that, fun fact, is recorded in my basement. My husband is going to produce it. So I get to kind of get a sneaky here every week. But why Portage and Main? for your first book together?
We had wanted to write a history of the city, but like a full history hasn't really been done ever. But then you get stuck with this thing. If you write a whole history of Winnipeg, what stays and what goes.
Yeah.
And I think we settled on Portage and Main as a focal point for exploring how Winnipeg evolves around it. Because Portage and Main has been a fixed point in Winnipeg since the 1860s. So you can watch the city change around this one point.
Yeah, which is kind of incredible to think about.
Yeah, it really sort of pops up around that one central point and sort of expands from there.
Yeah, it's and I think I was born in 1985. My whole life, you were probably more upsettingly recently born. But for all of our lives, and I'm sure for many of yours as well, we haven't been able to walk across it, and there's been really no there. You could go to celebrate like the Jets, or like maybe be in a protest, but no other time. So there's really no there. I couldn't believe reading this book how much actually had happened there and how important it is to the city. Yeah, exactly. So talk to me about that and just sort of, obviously so much research went into this. Talk to me about the process and kind of telling the story of Portage and Main.
Yeah, I mean, we started talking about writing a book like a few years ago and sort of putting together notes and such. I think we both sort of have our little sort of niches.
Yeah.
So we were able to sort of dive into those. And then,
We've done a few episodes for the podcast that touched on some things that come up in the book. Like I had
Yeah.
done an episode on closing the intersection.
Right.
We had talked about If Day, which is that fake Nazi invasion, and I knew Portage and Main was kind of involved in that. So we had enough background, I think, to get us started pretty easily. And then thankfully a lot of, at least the newspapers in Manitoba are digitized online. So it becomes a lot easier for researchers with day jobs to do some of that if we can just do that from home after hours.
Yeah, it also is, as someone who works at the newspaper now, like I think about like you guys in 50 years, like taking things I wrote, and it's scary. It's scary. It's scary.
well, there is stuff where we got into like more recent stuff, which always is a little trickier.
Yeah, or I'm sure you found stuff that was wrong, right?
Oh, yeah.
All the time, I'm like, you know, what I love about the podcast, and I think really translated to this book, is how conversational you are, how you really have a knack for finding the quirky and the funny in the story, and there is no exception here. We are going to talk about a certain war memorial.
Yes,
later in the
very
conversation. But yeah, talk to me about the importance of that, I guess, just making history accessible.
One thing the cover of the book plays into this, because this was something we talked about a little bit, is that we didn't want it to feel like a sort of dense, like imposing book with a black and white photo that looked very like academic.
Yeah, and like we both come from like museums and giving sort of like Sabrina used to work for the Exchange Biz, giving historical tours.
I still work with children, so
yeah, you know, we've sort of worked with the public. I
think it's easier to explain things in a sort of funny or gossipy way. People tend to listen.
I mean, the other thing is, I feel like when we do, less so for the book, but when we do the podcast, we're often sort of writing for each other.
Totally.
You know, I'm looking for things that I know will make Sabrina laugh.
I feel like even for the book, I would hold on to things until I sent you the final chapter to be like, there's something crazy in here, you have to find it.
Yeah. That's the best part of listening to you guys report upstairs.
If you ever listen and it seems like one of us is surprised, genuinely we do keep things back.
Tell me a bit about, so obviously you're still speaking, you still record a podcast, so how was the process of writing a book together?
I mean, pretty easy.
Yeah,
like I said, like we both kind of had our niches, so I think like dividing things up really wasn't that tricky. You know, and some of it was stuff we'd already done pre-existing research on.
Yeah.
I had done more of the sort of like, I don't know, Victorian period, sort of early 1900s stuff. Sabrina had done some more sort of mid-century research.
I think that like the joke I'll often make is that we both want to do the least amount of hard work possible. So usually when it comes to a project, we try and split the work fairly equally when we can. So we make sure we each like tackle an equal amount of chapters.
Yeah.
I think for those who haven't read it yet, which obviously you're all going to buy a copy and get it signed after this.
So I'm just going to smell something here.
But maybe let's start, I know you start with Nestawa, at the Forks. And I think that's a really apt beginning because it's something that Sabrina and I have talked about because I've interviewed for my own pieces about Portage and Main, is that having nothing at Portage and Main would be like having nothing at the Forks, which I think we can't even fathom now. Why do you think the Forks was able to capture people's imaginations in a way that maybe Portage and Main couldn't after a certain time, which we'll get into.
I think the Forks benefited a lot because it wasn't really anything for a long time. Before the 1970s, the Forks was like a rail yard.
Yeah.
It wasn't a spot people were particularly attached to emotionally, so when the time came to redevelop it, it was really a blank slate without any baggage behind it,
Yeah.
which I don't think Portage and Main sort of benefits from.
Right.
I guess at Portage and Main too, like a lot of, what we get into sort of later in the book is like the push and pull between like different property developers,
Yes.
There isn't sort of one person who could take over Portage and Main and do something there. It's, for landowners and the city
Yeah.
and everyone else who has their ideas of what should happen there.
Totally.
The Forks also had a number of like stakeholders from different levels of government
Yeah.
and like one strong strategic plan, so there was a lot more vision going into it, I think, than has with Portage and Main.
It is funny though, just how surprising it is when our city like does a thing and then actually sort of makes a plan and follows through and it works. And we're like, how delightful.
I know, oh my God. With Portage and Main too, I think, we talk about vision, and I think it's always kind of worn people's visions for it, good, bad, ugly, and otherwise. Let's start with how it began, and for maybe people who don't know the story, and the guy, the surprisingly attractive man who built the first, there's photos in the book, who built the first store, I guess, general store?
Yeah, it was
Was
the
a
first
proprietor.
Yeah, it was the first general store at Portage and Main, and I should specify, it wasn't the first general store, those were around.
Yes.
He just had this idea that he was gonna put it at the intersection of these two, essentially fur trading paths, these two trading routes that had been there for ages and ages. Which meant sort of, all roads led right to his general store, though a lot of people thought that was a really dumb idea, actually, just because of its location. Its sort of nearness to the river, it was sort of windy and scrubby and swampy.
Yeah, Kenny. People thought he was, I think, probably crazy.
Yeah.
But he did it and was successful, and then had competitors that he attracted to the corner as well. Yes. So it's kind of evolved from there. So for the first however many years, Portage and Main is actually is sort of the heart of Winnipeg, and is a really thriving place. And like I said, I couldn't believe how much had happened there. My question for you, was there anything that you discovered or uncovered in the research for this book that surprised you or that you hadn't known beforehand?
I think it surprised me just to learn how similar our concerns have been over the years to some extent. I mean, you especially see that like in the 20s and 30s as like cars start to appear.
Yeah.
But even before that there are all these traffic concerns about like people are crossing the street, they're getting in the way of the streetcars. How do we make this intersection work?
Yeah. Yeah, it's that was something that I had written down. It's amazing. Like it's too wide for people to cross in a timely way. There's that
People
guy.
won't stop jaywalking.
People won't stop
Yes.
jaywalking.
Yes.
That was a real problem. And
There's a really funny interlude where they try to like outlaw jaywalking and they just can't get it done because people are like, no, we love to jaywalk.
They love to jail, even after that man, and it's only a little bit funny because he's fine, or was fine. He's dead now. This happened a million years ago, but who was hit by the car and then the streetcar.
And then also the streetcar, gets like kind of hit by the car, shoved back into the previous lane and hit by a streetcar.
Yeah.
So.
Stop jaywalking. But yeah, no, it's so true how the concerns were the same. And by the time you get to the 70s, how people were as opposed to its closure as they were to its opening in 2018, right? So it's like, it's very interesting to kind of see those cycles.
I couldn't find a single letter to the editor complaining about it staying open.
Yeah,
Which is really, really interesting.
that is really interesting, because I remember the plebiscite vote. There was pages and pages and pages and pages.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, were you team open or closed?
Team open.
Team open, I think, though I was sort of not in Winnipeg.
Oh, yeah, you were out of town for a lot of that.
I was actually in Toronto for a lot of that debate, but I do remember coming back and it being sort of a big thing that everyone was talking
Yes,
about.
that much memed map of everyone in the middle wanting it open, everyone in Suburbia wanting it closed.
Yeah.
So.
I was doing tours downtown at that time, and I had to explain to so many tourists how to get to the exchange districts from, like, the Fort Garry Hotel or Inn of the Forks. They'd say, oh, could I just walk up Main Street and get there? And I would be like, well, no.
You
And
can't.
then people would be late to the tour because they would try and take the underground, and they would, like, pop up at the Bank of Montreal and be like, how do I get out of here?
My joke is that they opened Portage and Main because of Hollywood stars' inability to get to the Fairmont. Like, we don't know where we are, we will not shoot movies here anymore, we can't figure out how to get back to our hotel. But yeah, it's so true, it's the concerns were very reflective throughout. What also surprised me is, like, again, we were talking about like how much happened there. So like the 75th birthday, there was a giant cake at Portage and Main. Nat King Cole was played there. Like, it's amazing to think about it, because for so long the image of it was so closed off, right? So talk to me about sort of like writing through that part of the history, like when it was really vibrant, and how did it kind of make you feel about how it is now? Obviously it's open since the book was finished, but how did it kind of like, I guess, color your impressions of Portage and Main as it existed, like as of a year ago?
I think it always stood out there was so much more like pedestrian life, both at Portage and Main and throughout downtown, because like the University of Manitoba would go do like freshman parades there. So there would be like the Department of Agriculture would have this weird atomic cow float that would be going up and down Portage Avenue.
Sad there's no photos of that.
I know, I wish, but there's just like there were so many more people everywhere. I think you
Totally.
can really see how it shapes how like vibrant it seemed at the time.
No, and I think too, like, I really like the phrase you used earlier that, like, there is no there. Like, if people don't know, that's from a Gertrude Stein autobiography about returning to her hometown, and everything has changed. And there is no there anymore. And there's a sense of that, of, like, reading into the past and being like, oh, this was something.
Yeah.
But I do think there's this weird thing where it still sort of, I don't know, it still sort of resonates with us.
Totally.
Like, we still go to Portage and Main when we're protesting, when the Jets win. There is, like, even though that sort of the there is gone,
Yeah.
we're still cold there somehow.
Well, and I think that is a great segue into my next question, which is just talking about, and I know you have a whole chapter about the making of an icon, because I wrote a piece that I interviewed Sabrina for, just kind of trying to parse this out. Like, why is this intersection so famous when it sucks so much? Like, why is it like, why are people writing songs that, like, look around, there's not, like, what? So, kind of help us understand why you think Portage and Main, like, songs have been written about it, people like really talk about it in a way that I think is prideful. Like, why Portage and Main, why do you think it kind of, despite all that it's been through, kind of continues to have that hold on Winnipeggers?
I think it's length is one thing. It is the one fixed point that we've had in Winnipeg since the beginning. Like, we've lost city halls, the legislature's moved around a little. We don't have a lot of public gathering points that stay open for all that long. For like most of Winnipeg's early years, the gathering spot would have been Market Square.
Right.
But that closes down after the Winnipeg General Strike in 1919, so we lose that one big public spot that we have. And then I think as the years go on, people keep coming back, it builds this myth of it as a place that's worth coming to.
Totally.
I think nostalgia also covers some of it, which Winnipeg is always very guilty of being too nostalgic. So like I think signing Bobby Hull there in the 70s is why the Jets players keep coming back there. So it's such a big moment.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, and there is this sort of aspect of tradition where if you sort of do something enough times, you sort of forget why you're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely, totally. And I love too how, and you write about this too, like when the, I think they were Free Press reporters that went through actually trying to measure the wind speed around the Richardson building, just to like, okay, we're gonna prove with data that this is the windiest corner. Because I think there's a lot of lore about it too. Like even the idea that it's ever been minus 50 here, which is actually not a recorded temperature or anything, but we'll say that it's been 50 below at Portage and Main, right?
Yeah.
So it's like there's also this sort of, that part of the myth making too, is because it's also a very extreme place, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you crossed it?
We crossed it the day it opened, before it officially opened, so we jaywalked in front of the mayor, which he kindly didn't mention in his letter.
I did warn him, I was like, we're about to jaywalk, don't look. So.
Hey, as we learned through your book, jaywalking is a
It's
rich
proud
Winnipeg tradition.
Winnipeg tradition, that's
It's
right.
fine. I wrote a column when it opened, and it felt very funny to be like, intersection opens, this is gonna be A1 news.
Yeah.
But it was also oddly moving, and it's not because there were suddenly walk symbols on Portage and Main, although I thought that was cool. I think it was because for the first time you could kind of see, oh, maybe the city can change, and also maybe this is a glimpse of what a future could be.
Yeah.
What would you like to see ideally happen at Portage and Main?
There's a bit in the book where, when they're complaining about the intersection closing, a Tribune reporter suggests closing the intersection to cars instead of people. And I do think that would be a really interesting sort of alternative vision of Winnipeg if we can ever hypothetically get sort of transit fixed in a way that we're less reliant on cars downtown.
Yeah,
It'd be neat to see what the area would look like with less cars and more
Yeah.
people.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like, so in part of the book, we talk about this 2004 design competition that happened. And I spoke to Doug Corbett, who was one of the designers of the winner of that competition, which was called Light Forest. And what he sort of emphasized to me was the desire to like soften Portage and Main. Because Portage and Main does feel very harsh, right? Like it is cold and windy, that stuff is just, geography. But also it's, very kind of tall buildings, until recently, concrete barricades. Yeah, and so I think, whatever we can do to sort of soften it, make it feel a little more people-y, whether that's trees or benches or, little pop-ups by the Richardson building. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna remind Sabrina of the quote that she gave me for that piece, which is like, as a historian, I just want to put a bunch of plaques and statues, but there needs to be people there to see those things, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to talk about some of the attempts at placemaking throughout the years that you cover in the book. And I want to talk about the War Memorial.
The cenotaph.
Yes.
cenotaph.
Okay, so this is what I have. Yes, I've prepared on this.
This was maybe the part of the book we talked about the most when we were writing it.
Yeah, so essentially what happened is, part of the research for the book is just sort of like looking through the old papers, searching Portage and Main and being like, what's going on? Is anything happening? Or is it just another traffic complaint? And when I was writing the portion on the 1920s, I kept coming across something about a cenotaph, which if people don't know is a war memorial. And this probably doesn't speak very well to me as a historian, but I was like, that sounds boring. So for a really long time, I just didn't read those bits. I was like, that's fine, we'll just leave that.
And I kept getting texts being like, oh, I see the cenotaph again.
Eyes glaze over.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it just came up enough that eventually I was like, okay, well, I do in fact actually have to read these and figure out what was going on with the cenotaph. Why is it coming up all the time? And it ended up being a lot more interesting than I expected. So in the 1920s, people are still like very acutely grieving the losses of World War I, right? So in 1920, there's sort of a women's group who put up a temporary cenotaph in front of the Bank of Montreal building. So this is not the soldier statue that people are familiar with. It's sort of much simpler. And the goal is that they're going to put up a permanent one eventually, sort of made of like marble or whatever, a nicer one. In sort of classic Winnipeg fashion though, nothing really gets done about that until their hand is forced. So in 1923, the Bank of Montreal ends up putting up their own war memorial, which is the soldier statue that was there until very recently. That was there for a really long time. And so then everyone's like, oh no, we're losing the cenotaph, we need to put up a new one somewhere. And there's a couple of choices they need to make. So first of all is where to put it, because that spot at the Bank of Montreal isn't available anymore. And the second is the design. And so the city puts together this cenotaph committee. They launch a competition, they get about 50 entries from across the country. And the winner ends up being this guy, Emmanuel Hahn. So cenotaphs are often either kind of like tomb-shaped or obelisk-shaped. Yeah. His has that sort of central tomb shape, but then on either side there's a sculpture of a woman, so one standing in for service, the other for sacrifice. So it's this mix of kind of like traditional and evocative. The judges really like it, they choose it unanimously. But it actually becomes a huge point of contention, the fact that he won this. Does anyone in the audience want to guess why? You know why? The hint is in his name. He was German. Yeah, so Emmanuel Hahn was German-born. He was a naturalized citizen. He had come to Canada at the age of 7. But to a lot of people, that didn't seem to matter, and it becomes this really interesting debate over who and what is a Canadian.
Yeah.
And so the reason I've got my notes here is because there's a couple of really interesting quotes from people. Local groups like the Daughters of the Empire, the Kiwanis Club, they basically demand a meeting with the Cenotaph Committee where they demand that Emmanuel Hahn's contract be canceled. They say, there was no complaint against Mr. Hahn as an individual. However, the naturalization of an individual didn't make him a Canadian in the true sense of the word. It didn't instill into him ideals of British justice. Another man representing disabled veterans said, it was a question either of discriminating against Mr. Hahn or against the 45,000 men who died in the war. And then probably the most sort of vicious is a man from the Travelers Association says, I would feel like spitting on the monument in contempt if Mr. Hahn erected it. So, you know, like, again, it's this really interesting conversation about who is a Canadian, you know, and seemingly to a lot of people in Winnipeg at that time, being a citizen did not necessarily make you a Canadian, nor did the majority of your life being spent in Canada. And so they end up relaunching the competition, with it being only available this time to British-born people, of course, Canada at this point being part of the British Empire. The committee also lies to Emmanuel Hahn, which, like, among all this is not the worst thing, but does just seem a little kind of underhanded. They say they've chosen a new location, and so they need a new design, which just, like, doesn't even really make sense. They hadn't even really chosen a spot yet.
I'm sure Emmanuel knew what was up.
Oh, yeah. So he, like, asks for the return of his photograph and his model, which I feel like is, like, okay, fine, you know, like, which also is very annoying for me as a historian, because I'm like, you know,
we don't have access to that.
Yeah. But in any case, so it takes about a year. They select a new winner, who's a woman, another Toronto sculptor named Elizabeth Wood. I won't make the audience guess this time, unless you know the story. The reason that her design becomes a problem would be impossible to guess, but she is Canadian-born. Her family's Irish, so she should be okay, right? But she is the wife of Emmanuel Hahn. So, okay. And I will say that really makes it sound like they were trying to trick the Cenotaph Committee. I genuinely actually don't think they were. She was not trying to, like, pass off one of his designs. They, like, worked in, like, side by side, but, like, separate studios. She's actually a very talented sculptor in her own right.
Let's talk about Liz's design.
Yes. The other thing is, so people are already feeling tricked about that, but her design also becomes a big issue. So, like I said, a traditional cenotaph design is like kind of a tomb shape. Hers is very different. Okay, this is a little bit of a tangent, but do you know the story of Le Génie du Mal? It's a Lucifer statue. In Belgium in the 1800s, there's this thing where this cathedral, they had commissioned a guy to make a statue of, like, the fallen angel Lucifer.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they get it back, it's, like, too good looking. And they basically freak out about it. He's, like, all, like, human looking and sort of, like, posing languidly, and they're like, you can't do that, you know? He's too hot. So they commission his brother and arguably get a hotter Lucifer statue. And so this is essentially what we've done here. Like, Emmanuel Hahn's, his plan was already a little non-traditional, but what Elizabeth Wood has proposed here is basically a kind of stone base with a really, like, hunky man.
We've got a 10-pack.
Yeah, he's, like, ripped. Like, this is
he's standing there holding a sword and just, like, very loosely draped with a cloth.
Loosely draped.
Yeah. And so people
There's a picture of it in the book.
There is a picture of it in the book, so enjoy. But people do get a bit upset about that, though some people are like, we do have the golden boy who is also naked. Maybe a little less hunky, but kind of hunky. I don't know. How do we feel about the golden boy? I don't know.
I love the person that was pointing that out.
Yeah.
That clearly wanted the horny war memorial.
Yeah, right. And then other people are like, can we please just, like, put up an obelisk and stop talking about this?
Yeah.
Which is fundamentally what they do. They're not going to run it again. They give it to a runner-up who has a much simpler design. That's the one. It's on Memorial Boulevard. It's still there. But that is how a war memorial became a debate about Canadian identity and also about how sexy war memorials should be.
Thank you for indulging my questions about one specific thing. But there's so many stories like that. And, like, there's so many funny little, I think, could only happen in Winnipeg things that, which I think goes to show how much Portage and Main is such a microcosm of the city and what it's been and what it will be and what it is now. Yeah. What was the most challenging piece of this? Because you do pack a lot of history in a fairly economical format here. So what was the most challenging piece of telling that story in such a concise, readable way.
The contemporary stuff was a lot harder for me. It's not usually an area we delve into all that often. Anything post like 1980 feels pretty current, and that like the people involved are probably still alive. And then especially when you get into stuff like Idle No More and Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, you know that like it is a like really important topic to handle delicately. So I spent a lot of time sort of like fine tuning that. It's not that big of a section of the book, but I knew it was one of the ones that mattered more.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, and I think that also speaks to just how significant that place is in terms of where it is, in terms of both Indigenous homeland and Métis homeland as well. Alex, you seem like you were going to say something.
Well, I was going to say, that's okay. Just, this is more on the sort of the research end, but the 1930s portion was really difficult. Just because there aren't a lot of sort of secondary sources, so it's all sort of primary research. But also there's a lot less sort of archival stuff for the 1930s because people were like poor and didn't have time to didn't have the time or money to take photos, right? Like there are things like, there were a ton of unemployed protests at Portage and Main, and I had a really hard time just finding a photograph of that.
Yeah, and sure, and actually that's something that I want to go back to. I know we're kind of jumping around through history, but kind of talking about Portage and Main as a gathering place. And I want you to talk more about, we're going to roll it right back to 1919, talk about the general strike and kind of the significance of Portage and Main and the general strike.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we think about the strike, often you think of the sort of like bloody Saturday riot on June 21st, which is the thing that ultimately ends the strike. But that takes place in front of City Hall on Main Street. One of the sort of earlier riots takes place at Portage and Main, and Portage and Main has always been this sort of grand display of like wealth and power in the city. Do you want to go from here? This is your chapter.
Yeah, sure. So like one of the things, we've thought about a lot is just that there's a really interesting juxtaposition at Portage and Main. The buildings have often been owned by Winnipeg's sort of wealthy and elite, but at the sort of ground level, at least until it was closed off, always sort of belonged to the people. And I think, that sort of clash of classes, we really see like physically during the Winnipeg general strike. That's also a really cool era because it is one of the like more studied and also more recorded episodes in our history. Like there's almost like minute by minute sort of descriptions of what was happening on some of these days, which is really cool.
Well, and it's also cool too to see how, just obviously I'm interested in news and how it's reported. Some of the language used was very editorial, I will say, where it's like, the protesters would be described really vividly in their violence, but then like the police were just doing their job, like a lot of like that
There's
kind of
a lot
stuff.
of the classic like passive language, like some strikers were beaten. But like,
exactly.
Like,
the strikers are viciously attacked. So it's also interesting to see kind of obviously the history through your lenses, but also using all this material. So I'm sure it was like also just a fun puzzle to go through.
All the
time. Do either of you, I mean, obviously the War Memorial, but do either of you have a favorite Portage and Main era or story?
I think the one that surprised me the most was when I was looking into the history of the Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre at the corner. I was sort of vaguely aware that before they were sort of on Market, they were just on Portage Avenue East in the old Dominion Theatre, but that's like well before my time. So I was like aware it was there, and I was like, I'll look into it and see what's happening. And then I found a biography of John Hirsch where they interview Tom Hendry. These are the two founders of MTC. If you've been there, they're the two guys in the statue right outside.
Yes.
And in it, they talk about going to the Child's Restaurant, which was where 201 Portage is today. It was a chain restaurant. It was open late. Hendry talks about there being a guy that worked there. His name was Detroit, and he sold pornography at like 3 a.m. And that restaurant became kind of like the go-to gathering spot for like artists in the city. So it's where Hirsch and Hendry are introduced for the first time. It's where they go on to then found MTC down the road. But Margaret Lawrence got coffee there. She's a Governor General award-winning author. She wrote Stone Angels and the Diviners. Also Adele Wiseman, who is also a Governor General award-winning author. Taiko Tanabe, who is a Governor General award-winning artist. There's lots of like famous artists there. There are also two interesting ones that didn't get into the book, mostly because I'm focusing more on Hirsch and Hendry, but there's a few other theater people that hang out. One of them is Douglas Rain, who was a stage actor. His name you probably don't know, but his voice you might. Rain acted in this movie called The Universe, a little-known director named Stanley Kubrick saw that
Ah.
and cast Rain as the voice of Hell 9000 in 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
He also tried to cast Roman Kernick, who was also a child regular and had worked with Douglas Rain on the movie The Universe. Roman Kernick said no, and then went on to do a number of other projects, including one called 2187, which was described as like an abstract collage film. I don't know if it's actually worth watching, but George Lucas sees this movie. And George Lucas directly credits this movie for helping inspire the idea of the Force in Star Wars. Specifically, it's a line that Roman Kernick says about how everything is connected and there's a force that pulls all living beings together. So we can claim Hell 9000 as a Winnipegger, I think, if we want to take anything out of this.
We are everywhere.
Yeah.
How about your pre-vows?
I really love the early stuff. I mean, part of it is that like researching it is fun. There's sort of like few enough people and things happening that you can really get in there and be like, you can sort of read everything, right? Once you get later, you're like, there's too much.
Yeah.
But there is also this sort of like comedic lawlessness that exists among a lot of the settlers. I think it's a lot of just sort of like young men who were sort of setting out for the West and sort of really thought highly of themselves and had a lot of testosterone, and so there's just a lot of sort of chaos.
100%. Like, and it just, and pettiness.
Yeah, no, like there's a story in here about John Christian Schultz who's just like, I don't know, just like a jerk and kind of like really crazy and aggressive, and it's really funny because he later on becomes lieutenant governor and he's just like a normal guy. Like, I think there was just a different vibe in those really early days.
I love that for him.
Yeah.
It's great.
Everyone let him forget about his early days.
Yeah, it's excellent. Before we open it up to the floor, it's getting to be about the time. Anything else that you wanted to add that I didn't ask, or that you think people should know about Portage and Main? The book or the intersection?
Should I call attention to our fun shirts?
Oh, yeah. We made matching shirts for this.
They've got this thing called the Republic of Portage and Main. This is, you guys will read about this in the book, but it's one of our favorite things from the 2004 design competition. It was basically a satirical submission where they suggested that the people of Winnipeg ought to physically break down the barriers at Portage and Main and reclaim it as a republic. It's really great.
There's a whole section where they're talking about like the activities they could do in the Republic of Portage and Main. It's like tomato throwing, cruise night makes it in there.
Bison run.
Bison running, and then there was also nude sunbathing, because they would have an urban beach.
Yeah, urban beach.
And jaywalking.
Oh, and jaywalking.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course. Let's open the floor up to these fine people, because I'm sure there's questions. Let's start with you right here. Sorry. Yeah, Steve. You got it.
Oh.
Sorry. There we go. Perfect. Now you're good.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
There we go.
We've talked about some of the various interesting Winnipeg characters over the years. Does Mayor Cornish factor in the early years?
Somehow Mayor Cornish doesn't come up that much with Portage and Main. I don't think it had been as much of a hot topic at the intersection. Cornish was too busy also, I think, stealing votes and money, maybe to worry about civic development.
I hear there's a One Great History episode about Cornish.
There is.
Yes,
There
yes.
is indeed. Yeah, that's a really chaotic one. So yeah.
Thanks very much. So you've touched on several aspects of what make a holistic city. Most obviously mobility, but also democracy, security, culture, education, and environmental sustainability. To a degree, what do you think is the most important?
That's a really hard question. I think, I don't know, maybe this is sort of a cheap answer, but I think just like involvement, maybe. I think Winnipeg can be guilty of being a little bit apathetic. And I think, we can sort of get all of those things done, just sort of through the involvement and passion of people.
I think if we asked for a little bit more sometimes of our civic government, like we do deserve functional transit and to be able to get around downtown safely. And we can ask those things of our civic government and not just accept it when they go, I this year.
I want to pick up on the mobility piece too, because
Yes.
that's something that is in the book
Mhm.
and obviously was at the center of a lot of these debates, which is people who are disabled being able to cross the street in a way that's safe
Yeah.
and comfortable. And the concourse wasn't that in many ways. It
Yeah,
was
I-
often like the wheelchair elevator was often out of service. Like I remember people would constantly be tweeting about like, oh, this is broken again. I guess I
Well,
can't.
someone got
Get
stuck in
across.
it once.
Yeah, like that is bad. But you do talk about it in the book, so just maybe for the audience, just to kind of run through how being able to move across the intersection has been sort of at the center of a lot of the debates around it.
Yeah, when it closed, one of the things that surprised me about the arguments against closing it is that closing the intersection was functionally a human rights violation to individuals who could not go up or down the stairs to get in there. This would have been in the late 1970s, so I think part of me was just surprised by how early these discussions
Yeah.
about navigating a city for someone who's disabled came about.
Yeah.
It's like they tried to file a human rights complaint against the city at that point, and it doesn't really go anywhere, but there's protests where people jaywalk
Yeah.
to show that it's important to be able to cross the street. And I think people do have a right to navigate in the cities that they live in, and to not be able to means they can't engage in anything that goes on. Right?
Absolutely.
They can't go to events, they can't
Yeah.
go to stores, they can't engage in democracy fairly if they can't navigate.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a great point. Other questions? Oh, there's two.
First of all, congratulations, Sabrina and Alex, for the book. As historians, you know the importance of storytelling and narrative. And you asked a question about the future and what it means for us. I ran for public office last election because I felt like there was a lack of vision. I'm really curious, now that Portage and Main has actually opened up to everyone and cars, what does this mean for our politics today, considering we have people dying on our streets because of cars driving over people? So I'm really curious about the politics and what's your perspective about what this means about our future and our future politics in the city.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right about there being maybe sort of a lack of vision. I mean, I think we've said sort of jokingly we've had sort of too many normal mayors in a row at this point. We need someone who's like a little kind of kookier to have some ideas. But yeah.
Yeah, it's tough too, because I think, like to really put a spotlight on one thing is like doing this or doing that will solve all of the issues we have in our city. And opening Portage and Main is really great, and it says, I mean, I wish it would say more about our like change in policy, but ultimately it only opened because it was too expensive to fix the membrane. So it wasn't like suddenly we had a benevolent desire to let people cross the street. It was just the cheaper option of two. So I don't know. I think it'll take a lot to shift away from like a very car-dependent culture. Most North American cities are struggling with the same thing. Prioritizing public transit's obviously, I think, one of the more important ones to help people navigate better, but also improving like active transit. When I worked downtown, biked or walked to work every day for about 2 years, even in the winter.
Yeah.
And I mostly walked when winter came around because I did almost get hit by a car once in the winter, and that was too much for me.
Yeah, and I think it is really like, I think if anyone's been paying attention to the news lately, there's too many people that are dying on the street behind like victims of vehicles. And I think that throughout the book, and kind of going back to what we were talking about the concerns being sort of the same throughout history, it really is that tension between pedestrians and people and cars. So is Portage and Main a place you go, or is it a place you drive through? And I think for a long time we prioritized it as a place you drive through and not a place to be. So I'm hoping that if there can be more of a vision for it beyond it's just an intersection, which I know was, it's just an intersection. Yes and no, right? As this whole book will tell you, it's never been just an intersection. So what could it look like now that it's open? What could it look like? And could the intersection change? I mean, winter is going to be pretty instructive, I think. It hasn't been open for a winter yet. Yeah. This will be the first time, right? So I think we'll kind of see what it looks like.
You should go test the wind again.
I should go test the wind again. But yeah, I think that tension between cars and people, and it's amazing to see how as early as the 30s that was a concern.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned it during your presentation that a lot of Winnipeg history can be funny. You know, even in not all the chapters, but most of the chapters, there was some comedy or comical moments. The question is there like two individuals in Winnipeg history and their sort of drama together that is maybe your favorite? Or like, if I were to explain the book to somebody and I had to sell one part between two Winnipeg individuals, which ones would you pick?
Are you fishing for a story?
What specific story do you
Are
want
you
from
fishing
us?
for McKenny and Schultz? Is that the story you're fishing for?
I was going to mention that and the cenotaph, but they were
Yeah,
mentioned during the talk.
I feel like one of my favorites is always the fight between Stephen Juba and the sort of entire Metro Corporation
Oh,
throughout
yes.
the 1960s. Stephen Juba was Winnipeg's longest serving mayor. He was nuts. And I think the best in the worst ways. Like, he was always picking fights. He was doing this really
He liked to
insane
call
stuff.
people stupid a lot.
He was really rude.
Yeah.
He wanted a monorail so badly.
So badly.
He was like, at one point he was like, he gave someone like a toilet seat to wear around their neck. He was always doing something. But he was often at odds with the Metro Corp, which is what oversaw all of the municipalities around Winnipeg, which was like super bloated. There were somewhere in the ballpark of like 170 members of council and committees. So that's like Transcona, St. Patel, St. Boniface. And the Metro Corps controlled a lot of public transit and road stuff, and Juba didn't always agree. So anytime the Metro Corps would pose an idea like, let's build a underground parking garage at Winnipeg Square, Juba would be like, we're gonna go above ground.
Yeah.
And it's not gonna make any sense, and we're not gonna do anything about it, but he would just stir up so much controversy, and there's so many weird stories from that
I
time
mean, he
period.
did have vision.
Yeah,
That's
that's
true.
And that is part of the dialogue. I feel like it's okay if we have like ideas sometimes that are ridiculous that will never happen, because maybe then we can dial that back a little bit and do some version of that.
Well, the first guy that pitched the monorail, when he pitched it to council, was like, I think it will be ugly and I don't think it will work.
And yet, the mayor was like,
Maybe.
You sold me.
so, actually, speaking of the monorail, let's talk about streetcars, because I actually
Yeah.
can't believe we got rid of that infrastructure. I feel like that would be so useful now.
Yeah.
But yeah, streetcars and Portage and Main, and kind of just quickly, because I know we're kind of running out of time, sort of the evolution of how people moved across that intersection, starting from sort of like ox and cart all the way to the cars that speed through it today.
Yeah, the streetcars are at the center of a really interesting strike as well,
Mhm.
which a lot of it had to get left out of this book. There's like so much, it got put into an episode, so if people want to go listen to that, they can, but a lot of it didn't happen at Portage and Main, which is why some of it got left out, but there's a streetcar strike, and Winnipeg basically goes nuts about it. Like, the city hires, strike breakers, scabs, right, to come and drive the streetcars, and Winnipeggers basically just start like beating up the streetcars, sort of like hurling. It's sort of like March when it happens, so it's that sort of really like icy but also muddy season.
And the roads aren't like well paved yet either, so there is just a lot of mud in downtown Winnipeg that's easily accessible at this point.
And easily throwable,
Yes.
as it turns out. So there's that. No, but and the reason I think that we end up getting rid of it is because it's a private corporation and sort of subject to the things that happen to a private corporation, despite the fact that the city definitely has a vested interest in what's happening with them. And we did have a mayor, Seymour Farmer, who wanted to like make the streetcars city-owned thing.
Yeah.
And it just sort of never happens.
Yeah, it's just amazing to see, like, oh my god, we were a city who loved public transit once.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah, during that strike,
Yeah.
Winnipeggers were all wearing badges saying, we walk, and they walked to
Yeah.
work instead of...
Yeah, like it's
It's hard to imagine if that happened today, people would have that same level of solidarity.
well, and just the amount of, because I think many of these stories are labor rights
Mhm.
stories,
Mhm.
right? And you talk about the strike, talk about other labor actions that have happened. But yeah, it's the streetcar, and there's also a great photo of like when they stop running and when they're painted to look like
They make it look like
They're
a sad
crying,
clown,
yeah.
and it's crying,
Yeah.
and it's their last ride ever. They do a
Yeah.
whole thing where they bring out, like, mayor
forced
and
out by
council.
modernity, like
They have
yeah.
to dig out the streetcar tracks from the road, and then as it turns out, they didn't dig them all up, because we keep finding them.
Yeah, every so often there's a
Every
really
so-
deep pothole and you'll
And you'll see, so we actually do still have streetcar tracks in the city. They're just buried by layers of concrete right now.
That is the most Winnipeg thing I've ever
Yeah.
Were there any other questions from the room?
where do you get We made, these are one-offs or two-offs, I guess.
Two offs, yeah, ordered them, and I picked them up this morning.
There would need to be one great history merch associated. Anybody else?
Oh, right there. Oh, I think you guys are. Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I actually was kind of curious if there was anything notable that you just couldn't put in the book.
Good question.
Either something you came across where you just realized whoever is telling this is a rotten liar, or something that maybe you were expecting to write about and it just turns out there wasn't any actual documentation to support it.
Oh. I don't know
What,
about
what didn't you put in the book?
Yeah. There was a lot of stuff that I ended up having to cut, the editor suggested that I cut, probably wisely. From the more recent, there was a survey in like 2023, I think, with ideas for what should be at Portage and Main, and the ideas were interesting. They were like lookout towers and stuff, and the city releases all of the public feedback, including all the comments, and they're just hilarious. I don't know if anyone else really enjoys like civic feedback.
There's so many pages of it, it's very funny.
And they're all very funny, but I could only include a very few of them in there.
There was one that was like probably saying, open it, open it, open it.
It was people, several times. So I did have to leave those out. Well, not all of them, but most.
I had a hard time figuring out when sort of buildings changed ownership.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
There's an early chapter where I try and lay out what buildings are at the corners, and then after that point, you kind of lose track of them. And part of that is just that unless I want to go and like sift through the city's property tax records and fire records, I wouldn't be able to totally know what was where and when. So even by the time we get from like the 1910s to the 1950s, those buildings look really different. But I didn't want to spend every chapter doing another play-by-play of like, here's what buildings closed, here's what buildings caught fire, because there's a couple of fires that we didn't include in the book.
Yeah, it's and it's actually amazing how much it changed in a fairly short history, right? Like,
Very, very rapidly. It's new
Yeah.
every decade, more or less.
And sometimes there are sort of references to buildings, and we sort of couldn't really track down sort of where exactly that was, or there just weren't really great records.
There were some really fun times when we were doing edits with the publisher where a very kind editor was leaving notes to be like, does this seem right to you guys? Like, do you know where that is? And we had to be like, we have no idea.
No one knows where that is.
We've been trying for months.
No, there were a few things like that. There's also one of the more serious stories in there is about the death of Elzir Goulet. And a lot of sources say that he was chased out of a certain pub, which was right at Portage and Main, and he wasn't. It took ages and ages, and I did this, fortunately I had done it a while back, but I managed to get my hands on the inquest, and he had been at a different pub a little ways down on Lombard. Just one of those things that gets a little bit misstated and then sort of gets telephoned.
Well, and it's amazing how much, and we run into this in my job too, where it's like just to verify probably one sentence anecdote in something takes so much research. Because
Where did you get the
know,
invoice from? Was this your trip to?
Oh yeah, it was really frustrating because I knew from history that it had been sent to 3 different places, and so I had to kind of follow those 3 trails. One of which was to the archives in London, I think, who charged me money to look and say, we couldn't find that. So I'm like, okay. But library and archives did have it, so I was able to get them to like photocopy it and send it to us. Yeah.
And I'm sure there was stuff that was like Portage and Main adjacent.
For sure.
But not like, it seems
like the streetcar stuff.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to keep it pretty focused. I thought there was another hand up somewhere.
Just a quick question. Do the footnotes reference if you're interested in more? Episode 20 covers this subject.
I don't think we cited ourselves all that much, actually.
No,
you didn't actually.
That actually would have been smart, but no, we didn't.
We are not good at marketing, which is why we left the publisher.
But there are lots and lots of reference notes at the back of this book. So.
Yeah, we tried to cite as much as we could. There's lots of really fun secondary and primary sources if you want to take the time to go through stuff. A fun primary one, as a shout out, if you want to like traipse through the Provincial Archives website, is they do a fake blackout, like the Blitz at Portage and Main in the 1940s, And there is a full, like, 40-minute long radio broadcast of the Blitz. You can listen to 4 reporters at different points around the area, and you can hear, like, the gunfire and the bombs dropping and people, like, laughing really nervously because they, like, it's scary and kind of real, but
They know
it's
not
fake.
real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can listen to all of that. Yeah. So there's some fun sources out there if you want to look.
Yeah, no kidding. That's awesome. Anyone else? Oh.
I got it. Sorry. Wait for the last second, sorry. Relative newcomer to the city, but I do remember visiting and checking out the underground back in like 06, and I thought it was really neat. And then fortunate to be able to walk across the intersection a couple weeks after they opened, and that's awesome. It's like super cool. Setting aside all like the reasons for not keeping the underground open, do you think we lose anything, or is there anything that would be really awesome to be able to retain if we could, if it was financially solvable and all that stuff?
I'd love to keep the Bruce Head mural from
Yeah.
underground. There's this really beautiful abstract mural right around the center of the concourse, and it's so cool, but it was built in place and it's all concrete, so to remove it from the intersection is just, I think, not feasible, but would be lovely because it's a really cool piece of art.
Yeah.
Though I do think the idea of us having sort of a hidden piece of art under the city is actually kind of cool.
In very Winnipeg, the idea of a secret tunnel finally comes true.
Yeah. I mean, it is, what can I say though, it is nice to be able to go inside when it's cold out. Yeah.
There are tunnels under our city.
Yeah.
I work at the railroad and there are tunnels.
And streetcar tracks.
Yes.
I think this is a good place to leave it. So let's give a big round of applause for our historians. And you guys have been such a wonderful audience. And I think John will go over some science as you do.
Absolutely. So thank you all very, very much, and thank you all for your attention and for your questions. We will move along to the signing portion of the evening, so in just a moment we will move Sabrina and Alex over to these chairs. There will be a moment of glorious chaos while people attempt to line up down this aisle right here. Please do feel free to come up and get a copy of the book signed before you visit my colleagues at the cash desk. You don't need to rush back and forth right now. We're so very grateful to... Oh, and I should actually point out as well, you do have non-perishable food items as well. Sabrina and Alex are collecting items for Winnipeg Harvest. So there's a box right here, and I will refill that as needed. Also, these stacks are just a small representation of the books that we have here, so I will continually refill piles as you approach the table. So thank you again to Great Plains. Huge thanks to all of you for being here tonight. Huge thanks to Jen Zoratti for guiding us through the conversation. And of course, please join me in acknowledging Sabrina Janke and Alex Judge.